Number 10. Ghosts. It was a ghost who did the whole thing. Now everything makes sense. There's no way anything could go wrong in the powerhouse known as the USSR unless there was something supernatural afoot. No, I'm just messing with you. I'm not talking about ghosts pre-explosion, but ghosts after the power plant decided to go kaboom. People say that the site is now haunted by people who lost their lives in the explosion. One scientist who visited the site in 1997 said he could hear someone screaming from inside the reactor room that they were being burned alive. But the reactor room had been sealed shut and there's no way anyone could get in without a fingerprint scan and a password. So that means there could be some radioactive ghosts just chilling around Chernobyl. That kinda sounds how you make like a second-tier Batman villain. Number 9. The CIA did it. After the release of the critically acclaimed HBO series Chernobyl, I really can't stress enough how much you guys need to watch the show. It's so good. It's literally the highest rated show of all time. What more do you want? Anyways, after the TV series came out, the Russian government released a statement that the TV show was anti-Soviet Union propaganda and that they were going to make their own TV series telling the real story about how the reactor melted down because the CIA sabotaged it and it was all America's fault. This is some major tea on both sides. They're spilling tea about each other. Will Russia and the USA ever learn to get along? Are we gonna have to listen to the two of them complain about each other until the end of time? We should just get these two countries to kiss and get it over with. There has been unbroken sexual tension between these two since Rocky IV. Just start playing nice already, please. Number 8. The Soviet Union sacrificed soldiers. So rumor has it that the Russians sent in robots to try and clean up the explosion site, put out fires, and contain the reactor. But the radiation was so harsh that all the robots broke down. So they went to the next best thing. Soldiers. It said that soldiers were given an ultimatum to date me or I don't want to see you anymore. Wait, I'm thinking about the wrong unstable reactor. No, what the Russian government actually said was spend 2 minutes shoveling sand onto the exposed reactor or go fight in Afghanistan for 2 years. Really, the worst choice ever. Go fight in an intense war where a bunch of people are dying every day and your chances of coming back in one piece are slim to none, or for sure get radiation poisoning. Something interesting about the Russian soldiers who decided to shovel sand onto the exposed reactor, they were called liquidators because they would take shots of vodka before they went in. Vodka was thought to prevent any conditions related to radiation. We really knew nothing back in the day. Number 7. The land is safe to live on. Radiation is very bad, we all know this. Comic books have lied to us. Radiation does not give you any sort of superpowers. If you want superpowers, you need to be an alien or super rich. Those are the only ways. After the Chernobyl disaster, the radiation of the surrounding area was at unlivable levels, or that's at least what the government said. Some people from local villages didn't care, and after everything was said and done, they fought to go back to their homes. They wanted the right to live where they used to live, and they were granted freedom to do so. There are over 100 people living in the exclusion zone, and their life expectancy isn't any shorter than that of the average person. They grow crops, hunt animals, and even drink the water, all of which has recorded high levels of radiation. But no one seems to care or be affected by it. Maybe if someone has a baby born out of there, we'll get our first superhero. Just a little bit of radiation right out of the womb. Maybe that's the trick. Number 6. This could have changed the world. Even though there was an explosion at the Chernobyl plant, it wasn't a massive meltdown. It ruined the surrounding area and the reactor site is still extremely dangerous, but it could have been much worse. If there was a total meltdown, like a Britney Spears 2007 shaving her head level meltdown, running around with Kevin Federline level meltdown, the world would have been a much different place. The nuclear fallout would have made Europe unlivable and millions of people would have died. The Spice Girls would have never existed. It would have been a major bummer on epic proportions. And we can't really know how the whole world would have been affected by this. Maybe it would have only been Europe, but maybe it would have been the whole world getting hit by this nuclear fallout. Maybe all of us would have had to been raised in bunkers just like the Fallout games, and only resurfaced to find super mutants and three-headed dogs running around. And Thriller is still the #1 song on the charts. That actually sounds kinda cool. Number 5. Black Bird. So the Chernobyl disaster was caused by the mismanaging of the nuclear reactor. reactor? Or was it caused by a supernatural being known as the Black Bird? It is said that days leading up to the Chernobyl disaster, people saw a huge black winged creature with glowing red eyes. People believe that it was some sort of demonic entity that came to bring a dark omen to the area. Good news for the Chernobyl scientists, it wasn't their fault at all that the reactor blew. It wasn't because I'm bad at my job, it's just because a mythical beast came to spread dark energy and he did it in the form of a nuclear reactor meltdown. Duh. Some people who were on the site at the time of the explosion said that they saw a dark winged creature flying out of the fire. From now on, that's what I'm going to do anytime I screw up royally. I'm going to blame the whole thing on a monster. Did you just rear end me? No. Are you stupid? That was the ghost of Abraham Lincoln. I think you should be a little bit easy on him. When he was alive, cars didn't exist. There were just boxes attached to cars, okay? Number 4. Mutated animals. There's a theory that from the explosion, many of the animals who were in the radiation zone were affected by the blast and caused to mutate. There's even the taxidermied body of a deformed piglet on display at the Chernobyl Museum. There hasn't been extensive research on the matter, so it's unsure if any cancer growth or defects that were found on animals were because of the blast or were gonna happen anyways. Now enough time has passed and so few humans visit the area that the animal population has actually increased. I would say that the Chernobyl disaster caused the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and that they're actually Russian, but TMNT actually came out 2 years before the disaster happened. I guess the Chernobyl version of TMNT would be middle-aged Chernobyl scientist human in great pain. Number 3. The meltdown was a cover-up. Take out your makeup wipes, girl, because we got to uncover some tea. I think that should be my new catchphrase. Well, this is some major tea about the Chernobyl disaster. There is a rumor that the whole thing was a cover-up for a failed secret experiment known as Project Woodpecker. Project Woodpecker was a giant set of radio towers that were supposed to give the Soviet government the ability to detect nuclear missiles before they were launched. If this thing was to work, it would be huge. They could know where other countries were keeping their warheads and if other countries were lying about having nukes at all. But the project failed, and because the people working on the project were so afraid of what would happen to them if the higher-ups found out about the failure, it's said that they orchestrated something that would distract everyone from the problem and also destroy the problem. Pretty sneaky plan, but kind of a long shot. Too many things would have to go perfectly right for this to be true, but if it is true, it's some major tea. Number 2. The meltdown was caused by the KGB. Girl, if you thought the last one was hot, I got some scorching tea for you. There have been rumors that the whole Chernobyl meltdown was a plot by the KGB to control Europe. By causing the reactor to explode, it would strike fear into the rest of Europe when it came to building their own nuclear power plants. After the whole world was watching as a reactor melted down and almost destroyed the entire continent, not a single soul would get in line to buy a shiny new power plant. Instead, all of Europe would have to rely on Russia for energy, since they have a huge amount of natural resources. This would give Russia an insane level of power for the unforeseeable future. This is hot, hot tea. And number 1 on our list, UFO heroes. Alright, it's time to go way off the rocker with these theories. I was able to dig up some reports of people saying they saw UFOs that helped stop the reactor from becoming a major disaster. Mikhail Vartitsky was there on the day that the reactor went, and he said he saw several glowing objects fly over the broken reactor. He then saw a beam of red light shoot out from the glowing object and then it flew away. People believe that some alien friends came down to have our back in this terrible time of need. They were like humans invented tacos. We must save them.
Starting off number 10 now, we have the house that kills. Along the Venice canals there are expensive houses that are snapped up whenever they go on the market, all except for one. Its name is Cadario, sometimes called the house that kills. It was built in the late 15th century for Giovanni Dario, secretary of the Venetian Republic Senate. When he died, the house was inherited by his daughter and her husband. After a while, the husband lost all of his possessions and was stabbed to death, while the daughter killed herself by drowning in the canal. They had a little boy who ended up being killed by assassins. The Venetians were shocked by the 3 violent deaths and started to think the house was cursed as it was built on an ancient cemetery. Others said it might be the inscription on the floor, which read Giovanni Dario in honor of the city genius. In Italian, that's actually an anagram of who will live in this house will be ruined. In the 19th century, a descendant of the family sold it to a rich diamond merchant who quickly lost all of his wealth and died shortly after. The next owner died mysteriously in the the house with his lover, perhaps in a murder-suicide case. Death seemed to follow every owner thereafter. There was a suicide, then a car crash, then a murder, another suicide, another car crash, and then a suicide again, and then a heart attack. After all of that, it's no surprise that locals are now convinced that the Casa Dario is a cursed house. Even those who don't believe in curses have stayed well clear of the house that kills. Here's a little modern one for you guys now at number 9 with water blades. A number of years ago in northern Italy, a panic began to spread about a man known only as Water Blades. He was said to be an evil genius psychopath who would visit water parks attended by children. When nobody was looking, he would install blades in the water slides on the park. On some of them, he would leave tiny small blades that would just cut the people who rode them, but that was just a test. He would then build up to bigger and bigger blades, putting them in places to cause maximum damage to the riders. Legend says that people were left horribly disfigured for life after slashing themselves on these rides. According to the story, the knives were always found, but never Water Blades himself. Some people are glad that this is now a thing of the past, but for others, the damage is already done. People have been scarred for life, and now everyone kind of lives in fear of when Water Blades will return to leave a knife on a whole new ride for people who never saw it coming. Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Casa del Anime. This house in Voltri, Genoa, has a reputation as one of the most haunted houses in Italy. Many years ago, it was run as an inn by a family who all suffered from severe mental disorders. Legend says they would invite passing guests to stay for the night, sometimes even for free. This was all just a tactic though to get them inside. Once they were asleep in their beds, the family would murder them, take their money, and then throw their bodies into a mass grave. They say the souls of the victim are now bound to the house and roam around it during the night, making unearthly noises. For many years after this family's time there, the house lied empty. No doubt the stories had something to do with it. A new family finally moved in after the Second World War, and they witnessed a very creepy event. They said they always saw a young girl walking around the house dressed all in white, asking if anyone had seen her love. Locals believe the girl was engaged to one of the victims, and after he never returned to her, she went to look for him. Now she is doomed to wander around that house looking for her lost love forever. Moving on to number 7 now, we have the Museum of Purgatory in Rome. In a small church in Rome lies a single room known as the Museum of Souls. For those of you who don't know, Catholics believe purgatory is the place between heaven and hell where souls are trapped before they can advance to heaven. The chapel is known as a place where people will go and pray for their loved ones to advance to a happy afterlife. However, things have got creepy over the years, with recorded instances of trapped souls who have appeared to visitors and personally asked them for help. At first it was just eyewitness accounts, but then physical things started happening. There have been photos showing apparitions behind, and perhaps most creepy of all, handprints burned onto the pages of prayer books. If you were trying to get to heaven and avoid hell, perhaps you make yourself known just as much. At number 6 now guys, we have the Witches of Monte Matana. We're heading to Tuscany for this story, and it may either repel or attract you, depending on what kind of person you are. This is a mountain in the Italian Alps which offers hiking by day and witch hunting by night. For centuries, local legends say the area was a retreat for witches to perform their human sacrifices and occult rituals. They say the only reason anyone even knew that they were there was because shepherds would sometimes see flames and bright streaks of fire upon the mountainside. Today you can see a strange shaped rock that they are thought to have used as a table, not in the table sense that you or I know, more of a sacrificial table. Why did the witches return to this location? Well, again, local legend says they hid all of their wealth and treasure there before moving on to another life. Now, people go searching for the witches' treasure. However, there's a problem for any witch/treasure hunters out there. It's guarded by something, apparently. A ghostly spectre holding a huge scythe, exactly like the Grim Reaper. If you find the treasure and manage to avoid getting scythed by a witch's ghost, I guess it's all yours. Moving on to number 5 now, we have Poveglia Island. Just off the coast of Venice, you can find Poveglia Island, a place that many locals will never go near. Back in 1348, it was used as a quarantine colony for people who had caught the plague, known as the Black Death. People were sent there to die, with no hopes of being cured. Some believe that so many people were burned and buried there that the soil on the island is now made up of about 50% human ashes. By the 1800s, the island was being used as a mental asylum home where people were locked up, rarely helped, and often died in anguish. They say that the psychiatrist who ran the mental hospital was a butcher and torturer who tormented the patients for many years. Eventually he went mad from all the guilt and threw himself from the island's bell tower. He survived the fall, but his body lay broken on the rocks. That's when witnesses say he was strangled to death by a ghostly mist that emerged from the ground. Some say this was the island itself, now intertwined with the dark energy of death and taking its revenge. It's no surprise that boats stay clear of Poveglia Island and visitors are few and far between. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Broglio Castle. In Broglio there is a castle that has belonged to the Ricasoli family since 1141. It was owned by Bettino Ricasoli until 1880 when he died of a heart attack in the castle. His body was not buried right away though, but kept near the altar of the crypt in the family chapel. During that time, rumours began to circulate about strange apparitions around the castle. People caught glimpses of spirits walking about the castle as if they were still alive. None of this had happened before Bettino had died. The wind began to blow harder than it ever did for that time of year, opening and slamming windows violently. A swarm of moths invaded the chapel, forcing many of the mourners to flee. However, this was all building up to one single moment. When they tried to lift the coffin up again, it was too heavy. More people came, and more, but it just wouldn't budge an inch. It was like the whole thing was full of rocks. Suspecting demonic forces at hand, they fetched the local priest. He arrived and placed his hand on the coffin, muttering words in Latin for a while. When he had finished, to everyone's amazement, the coffin was suddenly light again. The priest claimed that all of the damned souls in the area had seen the coffin as a safe place to hide and had come from miles around to do so. He had dispelled them from the coffin but unleashed them on Broglio Castle. In the years since then, the souls are said to still wander the grounds there, ready to torment any visitors who disturb them. Next up at number 3 now, we have the Capuchin Catacombs. In this place lie the skeletons or preserved bodies of as many as 8,000 people, hanging from the walls or in glass caskets for the world to see. It was started by monks who would preserve their own so that they could pray with them, not just for them. Then locals began to pay the monks for their family members to also be interned in the catacombs so that they too could visit and pray with them. Monks, priests, teachers, professionals, men, women and children are all placed in different categories, hung up on niches or shelves. The Capuchin Catacombs stopped taking bodies in 1920. One of the final interments was that of 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo. She died of pneumonia. An embalmer used a secret technique to preserve her body over the past 100 years. Visitors are amazed to see just how lifelike she looks after all this time. Sometimes though, she is said to have actually opened her eyes. Scientists say this is just a trick of the light, but those who have seen it would argue otherwise. They believe that the energy of the catacombs have a dark power over the bodies that lie there. For a price, you can actually spend the night locked in the catacombs. I don't know what kind of person would want to do that though, and I don't know what they would do if one of the bodies slowly opened their eyes. Next up at number 2 now, we have Villa Magnoni. This is an ominous looking house located in the otherwise picturesque Italian countryside near the city of Kona. These days the house is almost entirely boarded up, which has led many people to believe the whole place is haunted. One of the only stories that has survived over the years comes from the 1980s. Back then, a group of friends reportedly visited the house and heard children singing in the garden. Great, they thought, I guess the place isn't haunted after all. When they went round to the garden though, the laughing stopped as soon as they turned the corner. There was nobody there. Then they looked up to the house and scanned the windows. They were all either empty or boarded up, except for one of them at the very top. In that window they saw a woman. She was wearing all white, her eyes wide open, and she was screaming at them. She screamed so loud they could actually hear what she was saying. She was telling them to leave. Leave now. The friends ran in fear and then sped away in their car. They actually crashed on the way home, killing 3 out of 4 of them. Months later, the survivor returned to the house to investigate. He searched inside the house and went up to the window where they saw the woman originally. He froze on the spot. The room from which she appeared had no floor. And finally, number 1 now, we have the ghost of Palazzo Vecchio. In the old city of Florence lies this luxury villa. There once lived a man there called Baldaccio. He was a medieval nobleman and brave warrior who was ultimately betrayed, wrongly accused of treason and killed inside the palace in 1441. He was stabbed and thrown out of a window, probably on the orders of a rival nobleman. Now his spirit remains remains in the palace, filled with rage at the people who killed him. In the centuries since then, locals have learnt that there's a set of rules to not anger the ghost of Baldaccio. After dark, you should not scream his name, you should not name him without a reason, and you must always speak with respect in a low, hushed tone. The most famous sighting of Baldaccio happened in 2001 when he appeared in the background of a wedding picture taken. Experts said the photo had not been tampered with, only adding to the legend of the angry ghost.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have the Lost Recording. This legend takes place in the Paris Catacombs, and it starts off in the early 1990s when a group of people who love to study and explore the catacombs were doing, well, that. They were walking through these dark chambers and tunnels when they just happened to stumble upon a video camera on the ground. They, of course, like any curious human, picked it up and checked to see if there was any footage. Upon checking the footage, they found that there was some and began playing it, and that is when they heard some very disturbing noises. After a while of watching the tape, it became abundantly clear to them that whoever was responsible for taking the video was clearly very lost and terrified as they took it. It was clear based on the video that the man was losing his mind as he was frantically moving about the catacombs trying to find his way out. The video ends quite abruptly as the man drops the camera to the ground, presumably where the group later found it. If you've seen the absolutely terrifying movie As Above, So Below, you might recognize this sort of a story, as this is thought to have been the inspiration for that film. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Lima Catacombs. This is a legend that has to do with the catacombs that are located in Lima, which are some of the oldest catacombs in all of South America. It is said that because of the cruelty seen during the colonial era, that many of the souls left inside the catacombs were left in pain and suffering. Many people who have visited these catacombs have reported seeing souls that are dressed in dark suits, levitating over passageways, and even sometimes yelling some of the most chilling sounds that can be heard. One of the most well-known stories pertaining to this is that of an elderly monk. The spirit of this monk is said to be seen on occasion at night just wandering through the corridors and is clearly visible to both workers and visitors alike. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Speaking Walls. This legend is another one that is in reference to the Paris catacombs, and it is about what is said to occur after the clock has struck midnight. No one is turning into a pumpkin and nobody is losing a shoe. No, this is much worse. It is said that if you are inside of the Paris catacombs past midnight, you will hear the walls begin to speak. These voices are said to be trying to persuade you to go further and deeper into the winding dark tunnels, and this is said to be so that they convince you to get lost and condemn you to joining them in their dark misery forever stuck underground. Listen, I'm not sure who would even be brave enough to venture into the catacombs in the middle of the night in order to corroborate this evidence, but if it's you, then don't listen to the voices. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Priscilla Catacombs Ghost. This is a legend that has to do with the Priscilla Catacombs that are in Rome. There were many treasures that were once hidden away here, but they were plundered in the 17th century, in part due to orders from the Catholic Church. It isn't 100% clear as to why this plundering took place, but legend suggests that perhaps it was because this space is thought to be haunted and maybe even cursed. There are said to have been some pretty unusual happenings surrounding these catacombs, such as guests both above and below ground feeling a presence and even sometimes feeling an actual push. It is said that whoever is haunting these catacombs is a terrifying presence that was responsible for pushing someone down the hill that resides on top of the catacombs and into the nearby river. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Ghost. This is a story that starts out during the French Revolution, and it has to do with a man named Philibert Asbert. Basically, legend goes that during this time, Philibert was a doorman at the Val de Grace Hospital, and one evening he found himself wanting a specific liquor that needed to be fetched from the cellar. Unfortunately, somehow he found himself inside of the Paris catacombs. He only had one candle and was walking around in darkness when he realized that he was lost. It is said that Philibert may have also been slightly intoxicated, which I'm sure probably didn't help anything. The candle was blown out, leaving him completely in the dark and unable to find his way out. 11 years later, his body was found, and it was identified by the ring of hospital keys found with him. He was buried in the catacombs in the spot where they found his body, with a tombstone describing his death. It is said that every November 3rd, Philibert's ghost comes out to haunt the catacombs, so far we know no catacombs after midnight and no catacombs on November 3rd. In our number 5 spot today, we have the Rome Catacombs. This is a story that pertains to the catacombs found beneath Rome, which are some of the most well known in the world. Visitors are welcome when it comes to certain areas of these catacombs, but not all are accessible to the public. That's pretty normal. It makes sense that some of these historic sites would be blocked off to visitors, but one of the spookiest parts is that it is said and believed that there are lots of areas of these catacombs that we are no longer aware of. This really makes me wonder what in the world could be down there. Surely someone has to know. Right. It is said that these catacombs are so extensive because they were used by multiple different religions over different periods of time, so who really knows what could be hiding and existing down there that we are totally unaware of. In our number 4 spot today we have the St. Stephen's Catacombs. This legend is surrounding these catacombs that can be found in Vienna, and it has to do with Death himself. Basically, Death is said to have challenged the tower warden, a full of himself guy named Franz, to a game of Skittles, which is a sort of lawn game. Franz prided himself on being excellent at this game and always knocking down all 9 Skittles in one throw, so of course he accepted the challenge. Apparently he was so good at this game that no one even wanted to play with him anymore, so one night when he was playing by himself, as he usually does, a tall thin man in a grey cloak and hood approached him and challenged him, and he quickly accepted. Franz went first and hurled the ball at the pins, knocking all 9 of them down, as to be expected. He then reset the pins up for his competitor, but he hid one of the 9 under his cloak, thinking that he was being all sneaky, and then he threw it out the window. Turns out the hooded man did see this. I mean, we know, but Franz didn't, he's Death. So he saw this all go down and he said, "Oh no, my friend, you do not win this way." The hooded man grew taller and taller as he straightened up, and he spread out his cloak to reveal his skeleton self. He looked at Franz, who was completely confused, and said, "I am Death, I always win. I merely need to hit all 8 plus 1. He took aim and blasted all 8 pins and Franz, who fell down dead amongst the Skittles. It is said that now Franz haunts the tower and the catacombs, whimpering and moaning for all of eternity as he searches for the missing 9th pin, likely never to be found. Gives us a story on why you don't cheat. In our number 3 spot today we have the Odessa Catacombs. The Odessa Catacombs are located in Ukraine, and while many of the catacombs on this list are vast, none are quite as vast as these ones that consist of over 1,200 miles of tunnels. What is exceptionally unique, however, about these catacombs is how they were used. While most catacombs are used to store those who have passed on, these catacombs are not actually used for that. These weren't made to hold the dead, but they have quite a history that includes being used as a nuclear bunker during the Cold War. While the historical significance of this area is rich, what's also rich is the legends surrounding them. The most famous of all suggests that one day a young woman named Masha supposedly ventured into the catacombs after a night out partying. Bad mix right there, right off the bat. It is said that she got lost and has never been seen since. While this story hasn't been confirmed, I mean, it is a legend after all, it isn't exactly hard to picture this happening in any of the catacombs on this list. In our number 2 spot today we have St. Mihans. These catacombs are located beneath the church in Dublin, and despite the spooky stories that relate to these catacombs, the church is still a fully functioning one. These catacombs are said to hold many of Dublin's most influential families from the 17th, 18th, and 19th century, but that is definitely not all. There are many mummified remains here, some of which there are legends of being lucky and being able to instill luck in those who touch them, but there are of course much more sinister rumblings as well. The further into these vaults that people go, the creepier and eerier things get. It is said that the atmosphere has a palpable change, and that people have reported hearing disembodied whispers around them like it's the Chamber of Secrets. Some people have even experienced the feeling of being touched when there is quite literally no one there. It is entirely possible that perhaps these catacombs contain some spirits that are just restless. In our number 1 spot today we have the Secret Hideout. This legend is said to have taken place in 2004 when a group of police officers were exploring part of the Paris catacombs that were restricted to the public. As they were doing this, they began finding some really strange things that they weren't expecting. It started with a PA system that had a pre-recorded sound of a sort of guard dog barking noise playing from it. From here they found this huge area that was wired for phones that were using stolen electricity. How do you even steal electricity? I have no idea above ground, let alone in the catacombs. The officers went on to find an entire bar area, a living area, a workshop, and even a lounge and a sort of theater room. Like, these people are living in the catacombs better than I live in the city. So this is all really weird, but here's where things get creepy. The seats of this catacomb theater were carved into the stone that's located there, and when they looked up into the ceiling, the officers saw cameras that were recording them. Shortly after this discovery, of course, more investigations into it all took place, and another larger crew went back, but when they got there, everything was gone. All the phones, everything that was in all of these rooms, it basically just vanished. The only thing they found in its place was a note that read, "Don't search."
Number 10. Poveglia Island, Italy. Poveglia is one of the scariest haunted islands in Europe. A series of mysterious activities were detected on the island, and that is probably the main reason why the island is closed for visitors today. The island was the place where victims of the plague were quarantined and infected dead bodies were disposed of. It is said the remains of over 100,000 souls are buried there, and let me just say, that is a lot. The island was later the site of a nursing home and psychiatric hospital. Now it's rumored that it had a mad doctor who carried out unconventional treatments on his patients here before eventually throwing himself from the church's bell tower or being pushed, whichever you believe. Due to this, the bell was later removed, but people from the surrounding islands claim to have heard it echoing in the night on multiple occasions. The hospital eventually closed and the island was abandoned in 1968. Number 9. Hellfire Club, Ireland. No, not the Hellfire Club you're thinking of. This has nothing to do with Stranger Things, unfortunately, and let me just throw in, Eddie deserved better. Anyway, the Hellfire in Dublin was built as a hunting lodge where Dublin elites used to gather in the 1700s. The ruins of the club are located on top of Montpelier Hill overlooking the adjacent Massey Woods. There have been numerous stories about black masses, animals, and even human sacrifice rituals happening in the Hellfire Club, but that's not all. Multiple witnesses claim to have seen a satanic-like creature with a human appearance and cloven feet. So, literally, the devil. You mean the devil. Another common visitor is the ghost of a young lady who is believed to have been burned inside a barrel and rolled down the hill. Number 8. Pripyat, Ukraine. Pripyat is a small town in northern Ukraine that was the closest town to the notorious Chernobyl power plant. Once upon a time, Pripyat was a nice little town that was home to 50,000 people. However, after the Chernobyl disaster, everything changed. Needless to say, no one lives here today and it's dangerous to visit even after all these years after the explosion. Now there are many ghost stories surrounding Pripyat. One story is that one of the nuclear physicists was measuring the radiation readings when he heard someone screaming inside the plant. This event happened in 1997, 11 years after the explosion. He asked the employees about it and they told him that he was the first one to enter the control room in 11 years, and that the only way to get in was through a thick metal door. Now even if someone did come inside, they would inevitably trigger an alarm that goes off. Even more interestingly, later that evening, the employees saw a floodlight turning on in the installation room. They thought there may have been a power surge, but seconds later the lights were turned off. Spooky. Number 7. Castle Rizal, Poland. This red structure looming over Rizal has had a horrifying dark past. The town was burnt down in the 1800s and a woman named Barbara Zdunk was arrested for committing arson and was later accused of witchcraft. In the castle, she was tortured and taken advantage of on multiple occasions and eventually gave birth to 2 children. Many people claim that the ghost of Barbara and her children haunt the castle today, and rightfully so. A strange smell of perfume was reported in the castle on multiple occasions. Doors that were previously locked were found open the next morning, and some people even claim that they were touched by a strange force in the castle. Number 6. Witch's Castle, Austria. Witch's Castle, also known as Musham Castle, has a gruesome history. Hundreds of people were imprisoned, tortured, and had their lives ended inside these walls during the witch hunts of 1675 and 1690. Those who did escape the hangings had their hands cut off, while others were branded by hot irons. Now, after the witch hunting was over, they went back to normal. But then came another issue: werewolves. In the 1800s, many cattle and deer were found dead near the castle. So these people jumped to the logical conclusion that this was being done by werewolves. This led to some residents being tried and executed in the castle's dungeons as the full moon culprits. Staff and visitors swear they have felt someone's breath on them, been touched, heard banging sounds, footsteps, and doors slamming, and there's also been rumors of people hearing the sounds of the witches screaming, and werewolves apparently still prowl the grounds. Number 5. The Hauska Castle, Czech Republic. The Hauska Castle is located in a forest north of Prague and is one of the most haunted places in the world. According to the legend, on this exact spot, there was a huge hole in the ground which was considered to be the gateway to hell. Nice. Paranormal activities were disturbing the region, and the Bohemians thought they would solve their problems if they covered the hole, which honestly sounds like a good idea. That's why they built the castle. Now, no one actually wanted to build this castle and get close to this portal, so they used prisoners to help. Hundreds of prisoners were forced to go into the pit to build the foundation for the castle. However, when they were taken out of the hole, they looked like old men. Later on, this castle was the center of a German occult dabbling during World War II, and multiple dead bodies of German soldiers were found on the site. Witnesses reported several different forms of paranormal activities, and some even claimed that the site contains the remains of a demonic beast who escaped the pit. Yeah. No thank you. I'm good. Number 4. Dracula's Castle in Bran, Romania. Bran Castle is a castle in Romania that is a national monument and landmark in Transylvania. It's commonly known outside Transylvania as Dracula's Castle because it's the only castle in all of Transylvania that actually fits Bram Stoker's description of Dracula's castle, even though he never visited Romania. Many historians agree that Vlad III, Dracula, never set foot in Castle Bran, which was neither a friendly place for him to visit nor under his rule. Nonetheless, the castle is still creepy. The castle has 57 rooms and, of course, a secret passage. While being beautiful during the day, the castle takes on a whole other look at night. In the villages near Bran, there is a belief of the existence of evil spirits called ghosts or stigoi. Until half a century ago, it was believed that there existed certain living people who were leading normal life during the day, but during their sleep at midnight, their souls left their bodies and haunted the village, tormenting people in their sleep. So yeah, I'd stay away from this castle at midnight. Number 3. The Edinburgh Vaults, Scotland. The Edinburgh Vaults are a series of chambers formed in the 19 arches of the South Bridge in Edinburgh. They were a part of the South Bridge Act 1785 and was completed in 1788. For around 30 years, the vaults were used to house taverns, workshops for cobblers and other tradesmen, as well as storage space for said merchants. In later years, the vaults were a hotspot for the homeless and for criminal activity such as illegal gambling taverns, illegal whiskey distillery, and body snatchers stored corpses there overnight. In the late 19th century, the vaults were closed off, but opened again in 1988 when a local man crawled through a narrow passageway in one of his buildings and rediscovered the rooms underneath the bridge. Witnesses claim they can feel cold gusts of air, to hear voices, and see and sense an intangible presence. Now, some ghosts are bolder there, like Jack, who grabs visitors' hands in the wine vault. Another, more menacing presence is known as Mr. Boots, an unkept man so named for his tall boots. Now, Mr. Boots lurks in the back section of the vault and has been known to push and throw rocks at visitors. Some have claimed to hear his footsteps on the cobbles and his echoing voice cursing throughout the chambers. Number 2. The Old Vicarage, Sweden. Borgvattna is a small village in northern Sweden. It only has 50 residents, a church, and a vicarage. That old vicarage is extremely haunted, perhaps the most haunted place in Sweden. In 1930, the owner saw a lady dressed in gray at the house. She was walking slowly towards him through the big hall, but decided to take a turn into the expedition room, the office where the vicars used to work. He wanted to talk to her, ask her what she was doing inside his house, but when he got to the expedition room, there was no one there. A couple moved in 1936 and they heard footsteps walking through the house and doors were opening and closing as if someone was moving from one room to another. When they wanted to welcome the visitor, they saw nobody. The wife was home alone one day when she heard music coming from there behind a closed door. She opened the kitchen door and the music suddenly stopped. The same thing happened later when her husband was back home. Then in 1945, another man moved in and he brought a rocking chair. One night when he read a book in it, he was pushed off the chair so violently violently that he fell to the ground. When he tried again, it was as if he was blocked from it and he fell again. Then the rocking chair also started moving on its own. Now, each room has its own little story, with guests reporting seeing shadows, hearing furniture move, and much more. And coming in at number 1 is Dragslum Castle, Denmark. This 13th century castle was built by former bishop of Roskilde and has been leveled by invading Swedish armies and rebuilt several times. During the Reformation, the castle was seized by the Danish king, who laid claim to all church properties. The bishop was imprisoned in the castle and left to die. Guests claim to hear moaning and wailing in the area of the castle's prison cells. Another lingering prisoner still haunts the grounds, the Earl of Bothwell, husband of Queen Mary of Scots. He was captured in Norway, imprisoned, and tortured to death in the castle. It's said that his spirit appears in the courtyard riding a horse-drawn carriage. 2 female ghosts also haunt the castle, a lady in white and a lady in grey. The first is the ghost of a nobleman's daughter who fell in love with a castle worker. Her father forbade the relationship and ended her life for not obeying his demands. He chained her to a post in the castle cellar and built a brick wall around her. A skeleton was found when the castle was modernized, lending truth to the legend. The second ghost is an old woman who died after castle doctors removed an infected tooth. While it relieved her pain, the extraction was infected, causing her death.
Starting off this countdown, we have the secret underground community. Believe it or not, but there is a group of urban explorers that like to hang out in the Paris catacombs. They call themselves the Cataphiles, and they sneak into the tunnels, evade the police, and then go exploring. In fact, they have claimed a number of sections as their own, marking it with murals and graffiti. Not only that, but they have found secret ways to get into the catacombs. Plus, they've started mapping the whole place out so that other explorers don't get lost. Only problem is that this is a very dangerous hobby. Since they are entering restricted areas in the catacombs, they have to watch out for crumbling walls, falling rocks, even pools of water. I don't know about you, but I prefer to spend my time with the living and not the dead. In our 9th spot, we have the Lost Girl. In 2005, a group of teens illegally snuck into the catacombs on New Year's. Sadly, they all didn't make it out alive. They all were drinking and having a blast when one of their friends, Masha, wandered off alone. When they finally realized she had disappeared, they went out looking for her but couldn't find her. No one knew what happened to her until 4 months later. That's when a group of boys were exploring the catacombs when they stumbled upon her frozen body. Since she was drunk, she wandered off to another section of the catacombs and then got lost and froze to death. How heartbreaking. Coming in at number 8, we have Philibert Aspel. Philibert Aspel was a doorkeeper at the Val de Grace Hospital during the French Revolution. And the hotel actually had a staircase located in the courtyard that would lead to the catacombs. So one night in November of 1793, Philibert descended into the catacombs to retrieve a bottle of liquor stored down there. However, he only brought 1 candle with him, and it was not enough to light the way. Eventually it blew out and he was down there in pitch black. Being semi-intoxicated, he stumbled around the catacombs lost. For 11 years, no one knew what happened to him. That was until 1804 when his body was found. He was identified by the hospital keyring hanging from his belt. Moving on, number 7, we have the Whispering Walls. A number of explorers have claimed that no one should ever be in the Paris catacombs after midnight. For if you are, then the walls will begin to speak. People have claimed to have heard disembodied voices coming from the catacombs. These voices confuse them and try to persuade them to travel deeper and deeper into the catacombs until you're in too far that you're lost and you can't escape. Actually, fun fact, they use this as inspiration for the movie As Above, So Below, which takes place in the Paris catacombs. In our 6th spot today, we have the camera system. In 2004, a group of French police explored some of the restricted areas of the Paris catacombs. And that's when they discovered something truly terrifying. First, they found a PA system that when triggered would play sounds of guard dogs barking. Then they found a full-on bar, living area, workshop, lounge, and cinema with space to fit 20 people. Like what? Not only that, but whoever created this little home setup was stealing other people's electricity from above. The creepiest part is that they had a full-on security camera set up, and the police soon realized that they were being watched. They left to get a bigger team to further investigate the area, but by the time they got back, everything was gone. The only thing left was a note that read, "Don't search." We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with De Kiel. De Kiel is the name of a very mysterious man. We don't know much about him, but we do know that he was a veteran of the French army, and he was also an artist. In fact, he created a number of sculptures for the catacombs. However, this eventually led to his death. During the construction of one of his sculptures, a part of it fell and crushed him completely. It's said that to this day, his soul wanders the catacombs. In fact, people have seen him down there before. In our 4th spot today, we have the Crypt of Passions. The Crypt of Passions, located in the ossuary, is a pillar that is covered in skulls to the point that it's just completely concealed. The skulls end up forming what looks like a barrel, which is creepy for a number of reasons. Just take in, those are real skulls. You're surrounded by people who used to be living, and most of them died in tragic ways, and then their bones were used for an art display. A number of people who have visited this area in the catacombs have reported feeling very uneasy around the Crypt of Passion. It's believed that some of the souls that were placed there have not found peace. I mean, in some cultures, they believe that a proper burial must be done with a tomb marker, or else the soul will never be able to rest or go to the afterlife. However, that was not possible at the time. The catacombs were built because grave overcrowding was a serious issue back then, among other things. In our 3rd spot today, we have the scratch marks. There's this really creepy area in the Paris catacombs where it's just a wall of scratches. Like, it looks as if bodies rose from the dead and tried to scratch their way out. It's a creepy touch to the place, that's for sure. Moving on to number 2, we have the Lost Tape. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard about this urban legend before, and in fact it also inspired the movie As Above, So Below. And it might not even be a legend, it might be real, but to this day, no one knows. Once upon a time, in 1990, a weird dusty camcorder was discovered in the catacombs. The camera appeared to have been there for quite some time, so they decided to inspect it. What was found on it was very disturbing. The video was of an unidentified male explorer wandering around the catacombs. While down there, we see him interacting with the skulls around him. But then something spooks the man and he ends up growing paranoid and panicked. At one point, he drops the camera and just runs away. Sadly, he never made it out alive. This tape contains the final moments of his life. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the Criminals. In 2017, it was discovered that a group of robbers used the catacombs to break into an apartment. Basically, they figured out that the catacombs were right under an apartment vault. So they drilled their way in through the limestone and entered the apartment to steal over 300 bottles of vintage wine. In total, they valued at close to 250,000 euros. Isn't that insane?
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have Breavel's Castle in Gloucester. I don't know, if I said that wrong, remove some letters. I don't know what to tell you. Breavel's Castle is a ruined Norman fortress located in the Forest of Dean, and over the years the castle has been the subject of many haunting tales and ghostly sightings. One of the most famous stories of that is the White Lady who is said to haunt the castle. According to legend, she is the ghost of a woman who was wrongly accused of stealing from the castle and was subsequently executed. Her ghost has been reported to roam the castle's halls and corridors, and she has been seen by many visitors and staff members. Another famous ghostly tale from the castle is that of the Phantom Coach, who is said to drive up to the castle gates before disappearing without a trace. Legend has it that the coach is driven by the ghost of a former owner of the castle who was killed by his own wife and her lover. In addition to these tales, there have also been reports of unexplained noises and strange apparitions throughout the castle. Despite the many stories of ghosts and hauntings, this castle remains a popular tourist destination and a fascinating piece of British history. Why not head over for a visit. I heard you can even stay in the oubliette. In our number 9 spot today we have the Glasgow Necropolis. This place is exactly what it sounds like. It is a necropolis, and what place is more haunted than a necropolis? The Glasgow Necropolis is a Victorian cemetery located on a hill overlooking Glasgow, Scotland. Over the years it has become a popular spot for ghost hunters and paranormal enthusiasts due to the many haunting tales that surround the site. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the necropolis is that of a female ghost. According to legend, she is the ghost of a wealthy woman who was buried in a white dress and veil. Her ghost has been seen by many visitors floating among the tombstones and crypts. Another tale involves the ghost of a man who was buried alive. Legend has it that he woke up in his coffin and tried to escape but died before he could make it out. Visitors have reported hearing knocking sounds coming from the ground and feeling cold spots near his grave. At the end of the day, while there are thousands of people buried here, only a small group have gravestones and even fewer have names. This only adds to the eerie nature of the cemetery. There are even rumors that a vampire just might be wandering the grounds looking for its next prey. All in all, this place is full of haunting tales, urban legends, and a whole bunch of spook. In our number 8 spot today we have Pluckley in Kent. The village of Pluckley, located in the county of Kent, England, is known for being one of the most haunted villages in the entire country. There are numerous ghost stories associated with the village, many of which have been passed down through generations. One of the most famous tales is that of the Screaming Woods, a dense forest area on the outskirts of the village. According to legend, the woods are haunted by the ghost of a highwayman who was caught and killed by villagers, and his screams can still be heard at night. Another famous ghost story involves the Watercress Woman, a ghostly figure who is said to appear near a stream in the village carrying a basket of watercress on her arm. It is believed that she drowned in the stream while picking watercress, and her ghost has been seen by many villagers over the years. Other reported sightings include ghosts of a monk, a schoolmaster, and even a haunted pub. Despite the spooky tales, Pluckley remains a charming and picturesque village, attracting visitors from around the world. Visit if you dare. In our number 7 spot today we have Chillingham Castle in Northumberland. Chillingham Castle, located in Northumberland, England, is considered to be one of the most haunted castles in the country. The castle has a dark and mysterious history, and there have been numerous reports of paranormal activity over the years. One of the most famous ghosts associated with the castle is the Blue Boy. According to legend, the ghost is a spirit of a young man who was imprisoned in a room in the castle and left to die. His ghost has been seen by many visitors, appearing as a blue flash of light or as a boy dressed in blue clothing. Another famous tale is that of a specific room in the castle where prisoners were once harmed and then executed. Visitors have reported feeling cold spots, hearing unexplained noises, and even feeling the presence of the ghosts of the tormented prisoners. Other reported sightings include ghosts of a lady in white, a soldier, and even a ghostly cat. In our number 6 spot today we have Corfe Castle. Corfe Castle, located in Dorset, England, is a ruined fortress with a rich history and many ghostly tales. The castle was originally built in the 11th century and was destroyed during the English Civil War in the 17th century. One of the most famous ghosts associated with the castle is that of Lady Banks, the wife of the castle's owner during the Civil War. According to legend, she defended the castle against enemy soldiers and was killed during the siege. Her ghost has been seen wandering the castle ruins, dressed in a long white gown. Another famous tale is that of the Drummer Boy, a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the castle gatehouse. According to legend, the boy was caught spying on enemy soldiers, and this swiftly led to his demise. His ghost has been seen and heard drumming his sticks on the castle walls. As you walk up the steps to the castle, you might also learn about Edward the Martyr, who was set to be king until he also lost his life here at the hands of his own stepmother, who wanted her own birth son to be the heir to the throne. Other reported sightings include ghosts of soldiers, knights, and even a headless woman. Didn't see that one coming. In our number 5 spot today we have Whitby Abbey, North Yorkshire. Whitby Abbey is a ruined Gothic abbey located in the seaside town of Whitby, North Yorkshire in England, and upon looking at it, it totally makes sense why people say this was part of the inspiration for Dracula. The abbey has a rich history and has been the subject of many haunting tales over the years. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the abbey is that of the Whitby Abbey ghost. of course. According to legend, the ghost is the spirit of a young woman who fell to her death from the abbey's high tower while trying to escape her angry husband. Her ghost has been seen wandering the abbey ruins dressed in a white dress. Ghosts really seem to vibe with white dresses for some reason. Another famous tale is that of the Black Abbot, a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the abbey's grounds. According to legend, the Black Abbot was a former abbot of the monastery who was executed for his crimes. His ghost has been seen wearing a black robe and carrying a book. Other reported sightings include ghosts of monks, nuns, and even a ghostly dog. Despite the many spooky tales, Whitby Abbey remains a popular tourist destination, offering visitors a glimpse into the fascinating history of the abbey and the paranormal activity associated with it. In our number 4 spot today, we have Glencoe, Argyll. Glencoe is a beautiful and rugged valley located in the Argyll region of Scotland, and is pretty famous for being one of the settings in the Bond film Skyfall, but it's also famous for its haunting tales. The area is steeped in history, and it all starts back in 1692 with what is known as the Massacre of Glencoe. In that year, soldiers loyal to the English crown killed members of the MacDonald clan who had been hosting them as guests. It is said that the ghosts of the lost MacDonalds still haunt the valley, seeking revenge on their killers. Another famous tale is that of the Grey Man. According to legend, the Grey Man is a ghostly figure who is said to haunt the summits of the mountains in Glencoe. His ghostly presence has been reported by many climbers and hikers over the years. In our number 3 spot today, we have Highgate Cemetery, London. This cemetery is located in London, and for years it has been the central point of many a horrific tale. These stories include those of demons, ghosts, and all things paranormal, and even the famous Highgate vampire. Legend goes that the cemetery is home to this vampire, as first reported by 2 girls walking through the area. They claimed to see the dead rise from their graves. Soon after this report came the discovery of animal carcasses, which is never a good sign, but to make matters worse, all of these ones had been drained of their blood. Stories of the vampire spread like wildfire, and people were rightfully pretty creeped out. This all led to the vampire hunt that took place on Friday, April 13th, 1973. Friday the 13th. It's never good. During this hunt, residents of the town began exhuming bodies and then also beheading them. Okay? There are still many rumors and stories that swirl around the area, and I'm just gonna go ahead and say, if the gates to hell weren't located here before the beheadings, they definitely are now. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Skirrid Inn in Wales. I love visiting a place that has lots of history. You know, when you enter a building and can learn about its history and the people who used to walk in its halls, it's just so interesting and very cool, except for when you're sipping away on a cold tasty pint and find out that where you're sitting is a place that used to be used for public hangings. Yeah, things get a bit more grim when you bring that story up, alright? I don't know if I want what's on those taps. That is exactly the history behind the Skirrid Inn. The upper area of the pub was once used as a courthouse where people would stand trial. If the person on trial was convicted and sentenced to death, I guess this place was super convenient because they also wouldn't have to waste any time and could just carry out the sentence right then and there. A bit dark, I'd say. The bar decided it would keep the creepy little cell that was once used to hold the prisoners, which seems like an odd choice, but I guess it's all in the name of history. It is estimated that around 180 executions took place here, and to this day you can still take a peek at the hanging beam that was used way back when. Not exactly sure I'd want to, as there's no way that thing isn't cursed. Many people who have been to the bar state that they have felt things like a sudden drop in temperature, the feeling of a rope around their neck, or even seeing some strange, scary, shadowy figures. I got a strange feeling that if you were to head into the cell that's still around, you just might find yourself in a place that you don't want to go to. In our number 1 spot today, we have Blickling Hall in Norfolk. Blickling Hall, located in Norfolk, England, is a beautiful, stately home that dates back to the 15th century, and it has been the subject of numerous reported ghost sightings and paranormal activity. One of the most famous ghost stories associated with the hall is that of the Anne Boleyn ghost. According to legend, Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, was born at Blickling Hall, and her ghost ghost is said to haunt the property. Her ghost has been seen wearing a white dress and carrying her own severed head. That is really about as haunting as it gets. Apparently on the anniversary of her execution, people have reported seeing Anne ride up to the estate in a ghostly carriage driven by a man who is also headless. Another famous tale is that of the screaming lady. It is said that a lady who was killed in the hall has been heard screaming in the corridors at night. The estate is now owned by the National Trust because no one else would want to buy that haunted of a house, and it remains a popular spot for those interested in history as well as the paranormal. Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Chernobyl ghosts. While you can visit certain parts of Chernobyl today that have been deemed safe, taking a trip may not be for everyone, or perhaps it's too far, or whatever 100 reasons there are for not wanting to visit the site. But with the technology we have now, there's another way you can visit the site, and that is through trusty old Google Maps. Many internet people have walked through the streets of the exclusion zone searching around, seeing what photos Google Maps holds, but with those virtual tours comes something that is absolutely terrifying people, and that is the apparent sighting of what is referred to as the ghosts of Chernobyl. Many people have reported seeing shadowy figures and sometimes even faces in the abandoned buildings left in the exclusion zone, and I have to admit, some of the screenshots I've seen are pretty terrifying. Do you believe that these are real ghosts caught on camera, or is it just a legend like many of the other things that we have on today's list? In our number 9 spot today, we have animal mutations. There's no doubt that the Chernobyl nuclear disaster had devastating effects on all of the life in the area surrounding this meltdown. I think that's something most of us can agree on, and while most of the human life has moved out of the area, there is a lot of wildlife that remains, and those animals have taken over the exclusion zone. While scientists often observe and test these animals, it is clear that they are all contaminated in radiation and thus have mutated in certain ways, but despite the rumors, there are in fact no three-headed cows wandering around. I think this might be one of the most popular legends floating around in terms of the Chernobyl disaster, the story that there are just full-on monsters living within the exclusion zone, or that the meltdown happened because of a failed radiation experiment on these animals. There are tons of swirling rumors regarding the animals, but in the end the effects of the radiation is seen much more in things like their ability to reproduce, or them not being fit for consumption, rather than in things like extra limbs and heads and eyes. In our number 8 spot today, we have the government cover-up Part 1. Of course, a disaster like this is going to get some government conspiracies swirling around, and we've got a few of them to talk about today, so let's start off now with the first one. This little ditty suggests that the Chernobyl disaster was actually conducted by the Soviet government due to the failure of a new, at the time, huge missile defense radio structure called Duga-3. This structure, that actually exists in real life, is suspected of having been wildly over budget, and it was the source of many complaints after it was built. The systems were extremely powerful and broadcast in short-wave radio bands. They would appear without warning and sounded like a sharp, repetitive tapping noise, and they would disrupt things like legitimate broadcasts, amateur radio, commercial aviation communications, and utility transmissions, which all led to there being international complaints, and at the time, people didn't know what this structure was or what the sound was. This led people to think that the signal was actually being used for things such as Soviet mind control or weather control experiments. So this story suggests that in order to eliminate it, the nearby Chernobyl facility was allowed to go into meltdown. It seems like they probably could have done something much less lethal and much less damaging, so I'm not exactly sure how true this one could possibly be, but I do suppose that this is a list of urban legends. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Chernobyl zombies. This little legend can most likely be attributed to a video game that takes place in the exclusion zone, but it is certainly not based on any real life facts. At least that we all know of. This little legend claims that after the Chernobyl disaster, we of course know that unfortunately people lost their lives, but what happens if those who did then became the undead? Yep, we're obviously talking about zombies here. There are plenty of legends that suggest the exclusion zone isn't dangerous and off limits because of toxic radiation, but actually because there are brain-eating zombies wandering the area. I mean, I personally have never received a lethal dose of radiation, so I cannot confirm or deny that this would turn one into a zombie, but I'm just gonna go ahead and call this one out for being fake. I mean, at least I'm really hoping it is. We've dealt with enough in the last year and a half, we really don't need to add radiation zombies onto the list. In our number 6 spot today we have It Never Happened. Okay, this is probably the easiest one to disprove, but perhaps it's not. This legend suggests that the whole disaster never actually happened and that the entire thing is just conspiracy. I don't know why anyone would do that, but hey, this is just a legend after all. There would be so many hoops to have to jump through in order to pull off that level of a stunt and keep it up for this long. Like, let's be honest, there are too many people involved for all of them to have been able to all keep the secret for this long. There's just no way everyone could keep their mouths shut. And what about the people who passed away from the event? I just have a lot of questions about this one. There are some weird legends on this list, but I do have to say that this one might be the least believable. And we just talked about zombies. Unfortunately, it seems as though the Chernobyl nuclear disaster was a very real thing that happened, and it affected a ton of people. It was certainly an event that changed the world and made us all a lot smarter when it comes to nuclear safety. I hope. In our number 5 spot today we have this super secret laboratory. This legend suggests that the Chernobyl disaster was a planned event that took place for a specific reason. You may be wondering what this apparent plan is, and that would be the plan to build a super secret laboratory. I mean, think about it. You want to build a super secret place, just cause the entire place to be so terribly contaminated in radiation that no one will want to search the area. Or those who do might even meet an untimely fate. It certainly is an evil plan, but it could potentially be quite effective. I don't think that this is the case at all, and I don't think Chernobyl was a planned event in order to build a secret lab, but I do agree that whoever originated this legend has quite an imagination. What do you think this lab would contain if this were true? Like an Area 51 type thing? Aliens and mermaids? Or perhaps that's where they're hiding all the three-eyed animals everyone keeps talking about? In our number 4 spot today we have the Chernobyl illness. This is one of the more malicious stories on this list, which I do not like at all. People who lived in the region of the disaster had a huge impact on their day-to-day lives, and a lot of people had long-lasting health impacts from the entire thing. This disaster has been linked to terrible things like an increase in thyroid cancer as well as other forms of cancer. So when fake stories of a fake disease began circulating around, it was honestly super messed up. One of these fake illnesses coincided with the height of panic, misinformation, and ignorance surrounding HIV, and thus the totally made up condition of Chernobyl HIV was born. This made up disease was the source of many a whispered warning against friendship or relationships with those who had survived the disaster. Like, these people just survived the worst nuclear accident in history and now they have to worry about harmful schoolyard gossip? Yeah, no thanks. Despite its terrible origins, people still spread rumors and fear-mongered, and it truly is a cruel, entirely made up story. In our number 3 spot today we have Government Cover-Up Part 2. After the release of the incredible HBO show Chernobyl, which you haven't seen it is a must watch. Like, it is such a good show. I watched it with Che, if you remember that guy, and it was just unreal. Anyway, after the show's release, the Russian government released a statement saying that the show was actually anti-Soviet Union propaganda and that they would be releasing their own Chernobyl show, which would detail how the CIA was actually the cause for the disaster. Rumor has it that the CIA sabotaged something which caused the reactor to melt down, and the whole thing was actually America's fault. I have no way of either proving or disproving this theory or legend, but I think it's probably safe to say that someone here isn't telling the truth. And it's not like it's a new thing that Russia and the US aren't exactly getting along. Maybe it's all just propaganda, or maybe there's some truth? I don't know. What do you guys think? In our number 2 spot today we have the Blackbird. People in the district of the Ukraine that houses Chernobyl have told stories of sightings of the Blackbird for years, and it is perhaps the most well-known legend that comes from the area. area. The blackbird is a human creature with wings and piercing red eyes, and it was apparently seen by workers at the Chernobyl plant on the fateful day of the nuclear disaster. After this, it was reported that anyone who had seen the bird would later report suffering from terrible nightmares and begin receiving threatening phone calls. Many of the people where the legend originates from unfortunately were at the center of the disaster and have since passed away from radiation poisoning, so no one is sure if the blackbird really is out there or not. The blackbird is said to be a symbol of something terrible being afoot, so seeing it is definitely not a great thing to happen to a person. I think it's probably just another one to add to the list of reasons why maybe a Chernobyl visit isn't the best idea. In our number 1 spot today, we have alien cleanup. There's always gotta be an alien story to keep things interesting and to add to the list of questions we have for extraterrestrials when we hopefully eventually find them, and Chernobyl is no different. Rather than the aliens causing the disaster, which might be where your mind went, instead this legend suggests that they helped in the aftermath. Apparently some people out there think that the Chernobyl disaster wasn't as bad as it should have been. I don't think they mean it in as bad of a way as that sounds, but rather they are just surprised that the amount of people who passed away in the disaster wasn't higher, considering how bad the whole ordeal actually was. This, coupled with an apparent eyewitness account from a man named Mikhail Veritsky, who claimed he saw a fiery ball of light hovering for a few minutes above the exposed reactor on the night of the incident, has led people to speculate that maybe our friendly alien neighbors swooped down in the nick of time to help clean up the mess that was made. Apparently this ball of light was also seen on September 16th, 1989, when there was more radiation leaking from the unit at Chernobyl, which some claim was the aliens containing the radiation. Honestly, I'd like to think that this one is true, because what a nice thing for the aliens to do. They probably have their own nuclear weapons, so they certainly didn't need ours, and we didn't really have the tools to clean it up, so I can definitely appreciate the fact that they lended a helping hand.